morning. So I've been coming to Identiverse for many years now, and I've noticed that many of the people who gather here have a common story about how they became identity practitioners. And the story goes like this. You start off in identity by accident, by administering a product. You're in charge of a Ping instance or an Okta instance, or you run the SailPoint software. In my case, it was Shibboleth at the University of Washington in Seattle. And after a couple of years, you back out of that and realize that you're actually part of a larger industry called identity. And you aren't just administering software. You're making business decisions as part of a larger ecosystem. And a couple of years after that, it dawns on you that identity is actually a niche field of information security. And you aren't just administering software, and you aren't just making business decisions. You are protecting the people attached to the identities in your system from harm. The field of information security is not quite as young as the field of identity, but we've already seen some evolution in the metaphors we use to explain it to non-security muggles. So we started out with a metaphor of us and them, good guys and bad guys, a sort of cat and mouse game. We build the walls, they find the holes, we patch the holes. And then we evolved that metaphor and said, maybe the people with the skills to make the holes in our walls aren't bad people. In fact, maybe we should hire them to tell us where those holes could be. And that led to a new era of red team, blue team. The red team attacked the system, and the blue team defended the system. And identity is starting to create a need for a new metaphor. It used to be that you didn't see identity nerds. That's what I call us, identity nerds. People whose eyes light up when you tell them that you have questions about obscure extensions to the OAuth protocol, because OAuth is secretly what they want to talk about all the time. But hardly anyone actually wants to talk about that particular corner of the internet. That's one of the reasons it's so easy to become an identity nerd. Getting your questions is roughly as difficult as sitting in the bar upstairs at the Hilton and casually mentioning that you wish someone would explain two-factor authentication standards to you. Be careful saying that around here because you may quickly lose 3 hours. We're passionate people, what can I say? So there have been information security events all over the world for a couple of decades now, and it wasn't until recently that they started featuring identity nerds. And it wasn't until about 5 years ago that identity nerds became the star of the show. Around the time that Google's Beyond Corp white papers came out, the general consensus started to shift from seeing networks as the most valuable and important assets to defend to seeing identities as the most valuable and important assets to defend. Well, okay, but the red team, blue team thing still works, right? I mean, your identity nerds are your blue team, and they're defending awesome systems. But we're more than that. We need a new analogy. We do more than defense. So let's work backward and imagine a world where identity has made a huge impact. So then we have to think about how did we make that impact? What did that look like, right? Maybe it was politics. Well, politicians don't seem to be able to get much done, even in Congressman Foster's case where their heart is in the right place. Sadly, we don't crown a king of identity who gets to issue edicts from on high about how everyone has to run their systems, although I have a feeling that would be both fun and effective. You can't buy your way into the perfect identity system, although the salespeople in the room might disagree with me on that. So how do we do it? I want to share with you one of my other passions for today, one that isn't identity. I want to share a little bit about a related field that is also fascinating to me that Congressman Foster also brought up, called macroeconomics. So I got interested in macroeconomics after reading The Big Short. Have any of you read that book or watched the movie? Yeah, that's one of my favorite movies. It's got a great scene explaining how bubbles work in an actual bubble bath. It's great. So anyway, macroeconomics is the study of markets and how and why they change. And nobody is sure whether macroeconomics is an art or a science. It involves a lot of math, so it doesn't really feel very artsy. And while you'll find published papers with equations and models and theories, it's not strictly speaking a science, because the only way to prove or disprove a hypothesis in macroeconomics would be to have a control Earth where we implemented different economic policies. Did the bank bailout stop an inevitable crisis? Or did they slow down a recovery that would have happened all on its own? We'll never know. So it's a field that involves a lot of imagination. And I like that because I'm an imaginative person. And once you start seeing the world as a series of interlocking markets, you can't stop. Why were there little containers of cream next to the coffee at lunch? Why did they have that shape? Why did they have that branding? Why did they come from that plant? And if you ask enough whys, which is something you will do a lot if you ever come work for Amazon, you will end up at something macroeconomics calls market forces. So let's talk about the market forces that act on the identity industry. Actually, let's not. Let's talk about the markets that the identity industry acts upon. So I said earlier that when you're in identity, you eventually realize that you're in a niche field of information security, and that your job is to protect people associated with the identities in your system. But you're actually doing much more. There is a market in attacking identity systems. There's a labor force dedicated to it. There are people who work mulishly day in and day out, just like we do, except their job is hunting. They are hunting for vulnerable systems. Systems with secret question account recovery, systems without two-factor authentication, systems vulnerable to password spray and credential stuffing attacks. And here's the thing. Just like any other market, this market is vulnerable to the forces of supply and demand. This is a demand curve. So the vertical axis is pricing, the horizontal axis is quantity, and the line running through the middle here, showing that beautiful inverse correlation, is an assumption of consistent demand. And you'll notice that as the quantity goes down, the price increases. Makes sense, right? Think about diamonds. The more rare they are, the more people will pay for them. So if you're a hunter, and the identity nerds of the world, the people in this room, are continually reducing the quantity of vulnerabilities on the internet, the quantity of the things you hunt, what happens? Your cost of doing business climbs right up that vertical axis. Your costs get higher and higher and higher, and your profit margins get lower and lower and lower. And someday, if we keep doing the work that we're doing, that cost is going to go so high that that profit margin is going to hit zero. And attacking identity systems won't pencil out as an economically profitable profession. And the amount of fraud on the internet will decrease drastically. That is our job. That is our calling. I think this calling is so important that I founded an organization, along with Ian Glazer from Salesforce, to help the people who do this job do it better, and to help the people who want to do this job to become proficient in it. The organization is called IDPro. We've been around for about 2 years. We have a Slack and an email list where people can ask questions of people who have been experts in the field of identity for years. I just asked a question about mobile authenticators and got 5 answers within an hour. There are meetups all over the world. There's a constantly updated list of events where you can meet and hang out with other identity nerds like this one. There's a job board so you can find a new gig if you don't like the one you have. AWS Identity has 102 of them. And you can find talent for your team. If you want to learn more about IDPro and the innards and how it all works, we have a plenary presentation at lunchtime today, so grab your lunch and then come join us. But I'll tell you a little bit of it now. One of the first things we did at IDPro was a survey of our members. And one of the questions we asked was how long it took them to feel proficient in their field. The most common answer to that question, how long it took them to feel proficient, not expert, but merely proficient, was 5 to 10 years. That's a significant chunk of your life, 5 to 10 years. And look at this slice on the left. I still don't feel proficient. By the way, the vast majority of people who answered this survey had more than 10 years of experience in this field. That big red slice of pie breaks my heart. I still don't feel proficient. And this is a problem that no one has an incentive to solve. In fact, there are incentives not to solve this problem. If I'm an identity vendor, I can only document my own systems. I have no incentive to provide fully vendor-neutral training materials. If there are no training materials, how do we expect people to teach this field, let alone learn it? Does anyone want to guess how many accredited undergraduate universities offer a major in identity and access management? You're smart people. And I've talked to them, and do you know what they tell me? We wouldn't know what to teach. There are no learning materials. There is no curriculum. So within IDPro, a group of enlightened individuals and companies came together to say, screw incentives. Someone has to step up for the good of the community. And I want to be that someone. They understand that we can't deliver the scale of work that we need to do without a ton of new people, which means that we can't be exclusive. We don't want to be exclusive. We have to pour our hearts and our souls into being inclusive of everyone who wants to learn this field, to make this the best field for new students and anyone who wants a new career to feel that they are valued, that they belong, and that we are setting them up for success by giving them the tools they need to learn the field. This group looked at the example set by the project management community. The project management community came to the realization back in 1996 that they needed a body of knowledge. This was before the words waterfall and agile were part of the vocabulary of every technology professional. This is a graph of mentions of the word project manager and project management. And I want you to pay special attention to the decade of unrelenting growth following the publication of the project management body of knowledge in 1996. We looked at that and we said, this is what we need. We need people to wake up to the incredible value of this field. So IDPro took on an aggressive goal. We decided to create a body of knowledge for identity and access management. We've completed some work already, but we came to the realization that if we want this to be a professional, organized artifact, if we want a horde of opinionated identity nerds to actually collaborate in a productive manner, we would need to hire the best principal editor the world has ever seen. Fortunately, that person lived on Vashon Island, which is a short ferry ride away from my home base in Seattle. We begged her to work for us, and she eventually conceded. I am immensely proud to introduce you to Heather Flanagan, the principal editor of the IDPro Body of Knowledge.
Thank you, Sarah. You are my hero. And I am ridiculously fortunate to have the flexibility to work with organizations like IDPro to advance IAM knowledge. I work with the RFC editor to help advance technical standards. I work with a community called Refeds to get down in the details of identity federations around the world. And I work with collaborative projects like RA21 and its successor, the Coalition for Seamless Access, which brings together scholarly publishers, academic and corporate librarians, and any other stakeholders that we can find interested in making federated identity something that users are willing to, well, use. So my experience with IDPro is not quite like the Internet standards community, and yet the similarities there, the need to create materials so that we can all function together from a common understanding of how things should work, as well as the need to herd volunteer engineering cats, it kind of blows me away. So how is a body of knowledge supposed to capture the enormous amount of information that makes up the digital identity industry? Having worked in and around this field for about 20 years, my experience, like what Sarah mentioned a few minutes ago, is it takes someone new to the field, a smart, talented, motivated new person, 2 years minimum to learn how to spell IAM in their sector. And it takes about 5 to 10 years to become truly proficient and spell things like privacy and strong authentication, and to understand and explain to others the difference between authentication and authorization. Now, that's in part because the only way to learn this material today is hands-on, working with more experienced people, if the newbie is lucky, and from experiencing the same mistakes that we've all made on our road to expertise in this space. Basically, we're in an apprenticeship model of learning, and that has some serious limitations. Now, personally, I like apprenticeships. I really appreciate the one-on-one interaction when learning new material. That immediate engagement with a master in the field is by far and away the best way for me to learn. Problem is, there isn't always an expert available to learn from. Maybe we're talking about a small shop that's just figuring out the relevance of IAM in their business. Or perhaps it's a larger organization that still has IAM as a sub-skill to general security, sequestered off into a group that doesn't directly interact with the departments that desperately need that expertise. Or maybe you live and work in a region of the world that doesn't have existing community of identity practitioners. In these situations, who's the new hire supposed to learn from in order to know what's important in IAM? Even the opportunities for meetups, in conferences and participations in online communities, it isn't really enough to get someone to proficiency and beyond. For that matter, I don't know how many of you have tried to hire for IAM expertise and had that position just languish for lack of qualified applicants. Not only are there not enough experts to act as mentors, there's not enough qualified people to hire to begin with. So, how does someone break into the field? For that matter, how does a manager who's come to understand that IAM is critical to her organization judge the qualifications of the candidates? And that's where the body of knowledge and the future IDPro certification program comes in. The body of knowledge is a growing compilation of IAM knowledge created and reviewed by this community. The IDPro Body of Knowledge Committee comes together every other week to consider the topics that are important to cover, as well as how to make that content more accessible to the world. Topics in the body of knowledge include everything from reputation, identifiers, identity lifecycle, consent management, regulations and laws. Perhaps you're more interested, though, in how IAM impacts specific sectors. So then let's look at the consumer, citizen, and workforce IAM sections. Digital identity, not just about humans, so there's a section on non-human entities and IoT. All the moving parts of IAM that have to fit together somehow, well, thank goodness there's a section on IAM architecture. But maybe you're not so much interested in policy and architecture, and you're more interested in the procedures. That brings us to the operational considerations section. There are currently 11 major sections planned, 42 subsections, and 88 sub-subsections, and that's just the first pass of what we thought needed to be covered. As the industry evolves, this body of knowledge will have to grow and evolve as well. So are you excited yet? So much material just waiting to come together. Unfortunately, it's not all written. Consider this a call for volunteers to get you to write. But we're pulling it together and publishing it as it is developed and reviewed. And I really hope that after this conference, more people will use their phenomenal brain power to create content for the body of knowledge, and therefore for your peers, for your successors, and for your digital universe. To date, we've received some great material from Andrew Cormack, Chief Regulatory Advisor for JISC in the UK, on GDPR. If you don't follow his blog, by the way, he's a brilliant writer and offers clear, cogent materials on many topics near and dear to our IAM hearts. We've also received content from Graham Williamson, an IAM consultant based in Australia, and author of the ebook Identity Management, A Business Perspective, and Andrew Cameron from GM, and I've seen him here at this conference. I know you're there somewhere, who's been in the field for over 10 years. He's working on different aspects of IAM architecture. Andre Koot from Nixu Benelux, author of a wealth of articles in both English and Dutch. He's offered up quite a bit of useful material on access control. All of that is in one part or another of the review process that materials need to go through before we publish it. So let's talk for a minute about the review process. You can't have material describing best practices, common definitions, and so on without actual buy-in from the community itself. But still, that review involves volunteer effort, and so we need to be sensitive to just how much time people have available to review material so that they can then determine their level of buy-in. The review process starts with a topic shepherd, as assigned within the Body of Knowledge Committee, and me as the IDPro Principal Editor. The topic shepherd's job is to work with the authors to make sure that the content is appropriate and on point, and my job is to make sure that the document is clear and consistent with other material in the body of knowledge. When the topic shepherd, the author, and I agree, then the Body of Knowledge Committee takes a look and decides whether the material is ready to go out through the IDPro board, so it can go then to community comment period. As documents are approved, they'll be published and made freely available to the world under a Creative Commons non-derivative, non-commercial license. What that means, in case you're not up on all your different Creative Commons licenses, is that you must give appropriate credit. You may not use the material for commercial purposes, and if you remix, transform, or build upon the material, you may not distribute the modified material, because I think it through a little bit, there's no sense in getting community consensus on a body of knowledge if it can then be changed upon reposting. At the end of the year, we'll compile all of the approved documents into a single book, ebook of course, and that compilation becomes the source material for the future IDPro certification process. I'm going to leave that out there as a teaser for now, but the certification process will be the thing that helps individuals and hiring managers assess someone's knowledge in the various areas within the IAM universe. Now, of course, there's IAM knowledge out there now. The treaty-based standards organization, the International Telecommunications Union, has ITUT X1257, Identity and Access Management Taxonomy. Gartner has material at least as far back as 2002. Academia has material back to the mid-90s. Even the US Army has an IAM reference architecture with associated terminology. Really, there is so much distributed, inconsistent, incomplete, and conflicting information out there. It's enough to keep us in a state of industry-wide handicap, where IAM professionals have to learn new technology with every IAM platform in every different sector that IAM exists. And we have to fix this. We can, and many do, look at this as kind of a Gordian knot of information, basically unsolvable because it hasn't been solved already. And I really don't like that. I really don't like the idea of just throwing up in my hands and saying, well, too hard, someone already tried, so no sense putting any effort here. So I propose we put some serious effort into pulling information together that we have in the IAM megaverse and building a consistent, well-rounded, and flexible body of material that's easy to find, access, and use. We can find those common threads and bring this to a common understanding, but it is going to take effort. The demand for IAM expertise is high, particularly in this digital age where privacy is moving to the forefront of people's and citizens' brains. Every online service, from online registration with a local pizza chain to a combination of local and federated accounts with scholarly publishers, all of that requires an understanding of the requirements for digital identity. So let's do something about making this knowledge consistent, clear, and available to everyone.
Thanks, Heather. This work is monumentally important to the future of the internet. And we can't do it without your help. Many of you have already stepped up to the plate. If you heard our call 2 years ago and became a founding member of IDPro, or if you work for a company that is a founding member, please stand up for a round of applause. These people enabled us to start this work. And if we accomplish what we have set out to do, they will be the shoulders on which generations of new, well-informed, and quickly trained identity professionals stand. The legacy of these people will live on in how secure the internet is and how easy it is to use. But starting this journey is not enough. The body of knowledge is and must remain a living document, which means we need new members. If you believe in this mission, we need your help. We need contributors to the body of knowledge. We need you to write down the things you've learned and the mistakes you've made along the way, the little implementation details that no one else knows. And we need you to ask your colleagues and your employers for money. And I know that's an awkward conversation. I know it feels emotionally icky, but the internet needs you to stand up and do this. Our membership grows by word of mouth and by individual members asking their employers to become corporate members. Now, I know I'm in a room full of information security professionals who can smell hypocrisy from a mile off, and I can see your skeptical looks saying, Sarah, you got Ping to join when you worked for Ping, but you've been at AWS for months now, and I don't see them on the membership page. Why aren't you having that hard conversation? Well, it's not for lack of trying. I went to my boss, and I said, it is in our best interest to invest a lot of money in this cause. And you know that sound your boss makes when you ask for something ridiculous, that sort of sound? So she said, but that wasn't a no. So I went to her boss, and I went to his boss, and I went to our marketing department, and I went to our recruiting team, and I explained that this is a grassroots movement of people. We're trying to help the whole identity industry. We want to train new identity nerds faster and find people of every race and gender who didn't even know they wanted to be identity nerds and bring them into the fold. And I am beyond elated to announce to you today that AWS has not only joined IDPro, they have invested at the most generous membership level we offer. Come up here, Jim. Let me put on your... Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jim Sharf, the VP of Identity for AWS.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Many of you have done what I did. You encouraged your colleagues and employers to join and participate. If you or your employer are currently a member of IDPro, please stand up. Forge Rockers, Microsofties, Salesforcians, SailPointers, please stand up for a round of applause. And if you plan to join as an individual or you plan to ask your employer to join, please stand up. Thank you. Thank you to all of you for making an identity an industry that embraces growth instead of fearing it, that builds people up instead of tearing them down. Thank you for putting not just your money and your time into this, but your hearts as well. This is the best damn community I've ever been a part of, and I consider you all family. Thank you.